to the Real Keal podcast. I just wanted to thank everybody who listened to episode 0 and episode 1.1. I did not expect so many people to listen to it. Kind of made me a little bit nervous to have so many people tuning in, but no, it was awesome. So thank you for the support. Tyler, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well today. I actually last night recorded 2 episodes of Poke Malarkey with Sean and Jesse, and that was a lot of fun. We actually spilled into 3 episodes because we started talking about all sorts of other stuff.
Because you can't stop running your mouth.
Well, yeah, it's truly my fault because I don't know how to shut up. But we talked about video games and anime outside of just Pokemon. It was a lot of fun. It's a good way to spend a Friday night. So I'm definitely starting out this Saturday morning in high spirits, and just gonna be good because we have a little bit of a rough topic to discuss today for today's episode. So, segueing into Hannah, how are you today?
I'm doing okay. I always get nervous, or I don't really know how to describe it. I get kind of weird when we talk about all of the stuff that we're going to dive into today, which I don't want to waste too much time because we have a lot of ground to cover. So this is episode 1.2. It's a continuation of our story, but I think I'm just going to call it Susac syndrome because I think that's more appropriate.
And I think it's the first time we're, while this is a continuation of our story, it's the first topic-based episode. So I think that's going to be, it's going to be a better idea of the type of stuff we're going to talk about going forward. We're going to focus on a particular topic. And yes, this is part of our story, a continuation of our story, but it is really focused on one particular topic.
So quick disclaimer, we're going to talk a lot about medicine, being in the hospital, healthcare staff, but we have no medical training or background whatsoever. So let's go ahead and just jump into it. This part, so I think we left off in the 1.1 episode where we got into our house and we were doing some renovations and things like that. That was it at the end of 2019, and we spent the holidays somewhat in this house, somewhat with my family in town. And then we basically just started off the new year here with a lot of plans, a lot of goals, and then 2020 hit, and a lot of that has had to change. So all of this seems to have taken place in March. So in March, that's when coronavirus was really starting to come into the United States. A lot of companies were making the decision to send their employees home and start working remotely.
As well as the government shutdowns, the widespread shutdown. And Hannah actually missed a lot of this stuff as it was happening. So
yeah. So it was mid-March when, and I'm going to need you to fill in because I start becoming fuzzy with some of the details, but in mid-March, or mid to late March, I
think you started presenting symptoms around March 18th.
Which was starting with headaches, I think.
So you had just returned from
Las Vegas.
From a work trip, and you were working from home for a few days before the actual shutdowns happened, and you didn't have a good work from home setup. And it started out that you were having some shoulder and neck pain. And we were associating this to
poor posture.
Yeah, poor posture and fatigue, and thinking, okay, you just needed to take a day off. You need to get some rest, and then come back, and we need to set up a more like proper makeshift desk for you, as opposed to, I think you were, sitting on the couch on your laptop trying to work for 8 hours a day on that, which obviously was not a good idea, not working. So I think we weren't taking things too seriously.
It was hard to know where everything was headed, or at least we didn't really think too far in advance, like how long we're going to be staying from home, or at least I don't really remember having any clear indication as to when we would be going back to work or going back into the office.
Your work already had a policy where you could work from home like 1 day a week or something like that. So it was a normal thing. So this was the first time transitioning into regular working from home, and Hannah, you don't have the greatest posture anyway. So it was like immediately we're both attributing it to that. But anyway, yeah, you start talking about headaches, and like it started as neck aches, kind of transitioned into headaches from there.
I remember some really weird chest pain. Like it was like all of the veins in my chest felt like they were constricted or something. Like it wasn't tightness. It was very strange. But I remember it was in my chest, it was in my shoulders, in my neck, just achiness, I guess, soreness. And then, yeah, some really intense headaches. And I don't really remember what those even felt like. I just know the only kind of relief that I ever felt with them was when I was sleeping.
I remember I was trying to convince you that, Hannah, you just need to take a break. You're not doing well. You need to take some vacation, to take some PTO time or whatever, and just try to sleep this off, whatever's going on. So a couple days go by, and on March 20th, you started, well, I guess it was before then. The first time we took you to an ER, and the first time we took you to the ER was on March 20th. The reason we took you to the ER was because you started talking about having like weird sensations in your ears. Like you were talking about like it felt like your ears were full of fluid, or there was something going on with your ears. So we're like, okay, now we maybe have an explanation. This is starting to sound like an ear infection. So at that time, shutdowns were already happening, so it was actually hard to get into doctors. I think your doctor was on maternity leave, so we couldn't get into your regular doctor. We were trying to find somewhere, and the first thing that opened up that we could quickly get into was a Minute Clinic. We go there, they do an exam, can't find anything wrong with your ears, can't find any indication of an ear infection.
Because the actual structures were fine.
Yeah. There was just no indication that there was anything going on. But you're having these symptoms, and then I will tell you, I spent so much time telling this story over and over to people with so much detail. It, looking back, is a very traumatic experience for me, feeling helpless in the situation, and I'll talk more about that a little bit later. But I think I've blocked out now some of the details, and I wish that I had written stuff down. But I mean, anyway, I know. They were concerned because of your symptoms that you were having. Dizziness. You had started experiencing dizziness, and that was unexplained. And that's where we also thought, well, your balance is part of your inner ear is your whole balance system there.
Your whole vestibular system.
Yeah. So that's another reason we were kind of thinking, okay, maybe this is an ear infection thing. They couldn't find any indication of that. So then the nurse or whoever it was that was at the Minute Clinic was concerned and said, you need to go to the ER down the street to get a CT because we think there might be something else going on, and they need to see because the dizziness is concerning. So we go to it was an ER, but it was a community hospital, so it's much more of those like
a standalone emergency.
Yeah. And it was more for those. It's not the type of place where you're going to diagnose mysterious illnesses, as this ended up being. So it's more of like, more of just the ER aspect. So anyway, we go there, they do the CT. I was not able to go in because of the coronavirus restrictions that had already happened. No guests or anything were allowed in there. So, I had to drop you at the door, and I'm pretty sure I sat in the parking lot for like an hour or two because I didn't know whether to go home or what to do or whatever. So
they didn't tell you anything about what they found. They didn't find anything on the CT.
Well, I didn't get any information, because then it's one of those things where it's like, I assume it's a HIPAA thing where they can't give test results over the phone. So as I'm trying to call, Hannah comes home, goes to bed. I try to get information from her. She's a little fuzzy on giving me information. And when I try to call, I can't get through to anyone who can give me information. So I'm like, okay, I don't know when I'm going to get test results back. But I think the basic takeaway was they didn't find anything on the CT. There was no
and they were starting to think at this time that I was maybe having a really bad migraine, I think.
Yeah, they didn't really know, and I think they thought it was something that would pass. So they sent you stuff to make you more comfortable. Well, that's, I mean, like,
I know, I just laugh because isn't that what you do at somebody's end of life? Is just
well, that's, I mean, it was, I mean, these are one of the painkillers that you were on is one that my 90-plus-year-old grandma takes for severe arthritis. Anyway, over the course of the next few days, you were just getting worse. And these drugs weren't helping. So then I was beginning to question, I was really struggling at this point because I was like, I didn't know whether to give you medication or just stick with continuing to give you Tylenol, which is what I had started you out on, because some of these medications, the side effects of these medications are the same as your symptoms. And I was like, I don't know if I'm making things worse by giving you these medications that clearly you don't seem to be tolerating, or at least they're not helping you.
And we started at this time, I think, started looping in like my folks who live in town and family members, kind of just bringing them into the situation.
Yeah. So we had we have a group chat with Hannah's siblings and parents. Hannah was on this group chat. So I'm sitting here trying to message all these things about how Hannah's doing. And she's messaging some too at this point. Basically, another day goes by and you're doing worse. And you're trying to text one of your sisters. You're trying to text one of your sisters about what's going on. And you look at me and say, I know autocorrect has messed up what I'm trying to say, but I can't figure out how to fix it. So this is when you really started showing obvious confusion. And I think that was terrifying. You were still aware enough at that point that was really frightening to you. And at this point, I was completely terrified and had no idea what I should be doing. And I was just lost. And anyway, we take you back to that same ER. And this time, of course, we're all Googling and trying to figure out. And
I think at this point, coronavirus was kind of a concern because
it was still early and
the symptoms were still so crazy. Like there was the typical ones that we hear about with the chest pain and the breathing and everything, but then there were some like weird symptoms coming out and healthy people having strokes and things like that. And so it was just kind of confusing and scary, and this was confusing and scary. So and
it's just the timing. It was impossible to not consider maybe you're having a weird case of coronavirus and you had traveled. And so I was also watching myself and seeing if I was displaying these symptoms, and that's where it was weird because it was like you would think that if you got something that I would also be getting sick. So I know that was something that we were kind of looking out for as well. And I just never had any type of symptoms. I went back to the ER though the next day, and this time they ran a spinal tap, which the proper terminology is a lumbar puncture.
My mom was concerned about meningitis because of the confusion.
Yeah, I think they actually, unless I may be getting mixed up and maybe it was just the spinal tap this time, because you had multiple spinal taps and you had many, many MRIs. But I know they did the spinal tap this time, which I was really worried about because, I mean, everything that I had heard about that is that it's a horrible experience. And I
don't even remember it.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, we were thankful for that. Anyway, you get sent home again that night. And
the dizziness at this point was like true, and in my mind it's different. I don't know if medically speaking if it is or not, but dizziness and vertigo to me are very different. Like dizziness for me is just some unsteadiness, kind of like bumping into walls or whatever, and the vertigo was true, like the drunk spinnies. That's kind of how I think of vertigo. And I was having intense, like the room was just constantly on, like it was like a tilt-a-whirl at like a fair.
I mean, you could barely walk across the room from our bed to the bathroom.
Yeah, and I remember getting, I at some point, I think it was like that next day or the second day I got released from, what am I trying to say? The second ER stay, I got home or whatever. And I wasn't eating very much, but I remember getting sick because I was just so dizzy from the room spinning.
That's what was getting really scary is you were not eating at this point. Like I couldn't get you to eat anything. And, I mean, I was giving you basic things and then you were throwing up, but I couldn't get you to eat. Like you couldn't get anything down. I was like, I can't keep giving you painkillers and you're not eating any food. And, I think a couple days, went by because it was like, we were trying to see if you could sleep this off because we weren't getting anywhere. And I was waiting for results from the spinal tap because we're still thinking, okay, meningitis at this point. I call back, and every time I try to call back again, it's not their fault. It's policy. They can't give results over the phone. And I'm like, okay, well, how do I know? And you coming home, so what did they say? I'm like, what did they say? What did they find out? And you can't give me any information because you just were so out of it.
And trying to remember the conversation that I had with the doctor before being sent home. Like I remember you asking me and you were frustrated, and I remember I just couldn't recall basic stuff anymore. It was just like completely falling apart in my head. It's really scary, but I cannot help. And I'm going to try not to be this way the whole time, but I just start kind of laughing whenever we talk about this kind of stuff, not because it's humorous at all, but because I just get so weirdly uncomfortable because I just don't remember so much of it. And it seems like I'm telling somebody else's story because I was just complete a mess. I was just
you were,
mess.
and you weren't yourself. And we're going to get into that more later, where it's like stuff you were doing and saying that it made no sense.
Yeah, I know.
Anyway, so you basically at this point got to where you were sleeping 24/7. And when you were awake, you were just in severe pain. I was kind of at a loss at this point. I was just pacing back and forth between our room, checking on you, trying to let you sleep, trying to distract myself. It got to where like I felt like I needed to be in there and watch you, but you were so unaware of everything that like you were pushing me out of the bed. And like I would, like at night, I would try to go in there and sleep next to you, and you would push me out of the bed. So I know like the last night that you were still at home, I ended up having to try to sleep on the floor next to you. There were times where you woke up and you were curled up in a ball just crying because your head hurt so bad. And I mean, I was terrified. I had no idea what to do. And at this point I was like, I think this was, in the early hours of the morning. And I'm like, I got to take you back now. And within 5 or 10 minutes of that, you were completely asleep and calm again. And it was the weirdest thing. And it was just so upsetting. And I mean, like I said, I remember going back and forth between trying to let you sleep it off and not be distracting you to trying to get you to eat and feeling like a jerk because I was trying to force you to eat. And then it was just making you sick because you were dizzy. And
I was pretty miserable to be around.
No, I mean, I felt very small and helpless during this because I felt like I was failing as your husband and as this person who's supposed to be taking care of you when you're going through your worst moments. And I didn't know what to do. And it felt like everything I was trying to do was wrong. And, I was like, I already took you to the ER twice. We haven't been able to figure anything out. I don't know. And I'll say for a long time after this, being in our house, we'd been so excited to have our house and have our own space. But for a long time after this, anytime I would be in our living room or see our living room, it was triggering to me because I remember times when I had to step away because I was not doing anything to help you, that I would step away in the living room and I was just kind of going crazy with my thoughts of where this was all going and what I should be doing. So for months afterward, our living room was just triggering to me because it was anyway, as you said, I was reaching out to your parents a lot, and at this point, your parents texted me and said, "Hey, your dad's coming over, and he's going to take us to one of the bigger hospitals,
like an actual hospital."
Again, no, we don't mean to say anything about the
it's
community hospital. They were doing what they were supposed to be doing, and this was something that you needed to be sent to a
being admitted is what I'm.
Yeah, you
needed
to be admitted. So so that's.
I remember this drive actually. My dad. I remember him coming into the room, and I don't know what I was wearing at the time, but I know you were helping me get into clothes and whatever, because I was just like so unaware. I was like ready to just fall into the car in whatever I was, like pajamas is what I'm saying.
Which was, it was hard for me, because that was, part of why he came over was because, I mean, I'd been having trouble helping you get to the bathroom. So the idea of getting you in a car, and with this extreme dizziness, I was like, I don't even know if you can handle a car ride on the highway, and all these things. So, figured it was going to take both of us to get you in the car. But at this point, you were so just
catatonic.
Not even really. You were just so mellow and sober when you woke up, and it was weird because you were so that. Just earlier that morning, that was the time when you were at your worst, curled up in a ball crying, and suddenly you were just like, we were saying, I came in and told you, hey, Hannah, your dad's going to come over. We're going to take you to the hospital. And you just reacted to everything. You started getting dressed. I had to help you, but you start getting dressed. And you were just so, just completely like relaxed, zoned out at this point. Whereas like you were responding to what we were doing, but I don't know. And I remember, again, you had to drop me off. We had to drop you off. And as far as we could only go as far as the airlock. And at this point, you were so unable to, in our minds, you were so unable to speak for yourself and talk about what was going on. And I remember, like, again, they were following all the proper safety protocols that should be happening right now. Which meant, we couldn't go in and we couldn't tell them what was going on. But I guess when you got up there, you were able to talk enough about what was going on that they didn't feel like they needed to call us, because I guess you were convincingly self-aware, even though we knew you weren't. I guess in terms of like reporting what was going on, you were self-aware enough. So we eventually leave and go back to your parents' house, and just waiting on phone calls. And
so you rode with us, and then had you packed a bag, or did you have to come back?
I had no plan at all, because we didn't know if you would be admitted or not. And later that afternoon, I did get a call from the doctor, the hospitalist, I think, that was on that day and was with you. And he was going through all the things. Like he called me and talked through all the things, and I told him the whole story with what was going on and what we'd done so far. He was super helpful, because I was able to hear back about what was going on with the culture for the initial spinal tap. At this point, they started running. They either ran another MRI, or this was the first MRI. I can't remember. And not that they were not sure, and that they were bringing in all these different experts to check different things of what it could be, because they were not able to really rule anything out at this point. It starts to blur together now, whereas there was a point where I could reiterate, I think, every second of every day of what was going on. It starts to blur together now. And anyway, I ended up, your parents invited me to stay with them, and they were much closer to the hospital. They lived closer to the hospital that you were at. So that was, and it was that made sense. And also the fact that, I was so just
beside yourself.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, I didn't know what to do with myself. And it was not a good idea for me to be alone with my thoughts and the helplessness and just sitting around waiting for a phone call.
You definitely at a moment like that just need support from people, just to be around, just so you're not sitting there in silence. You just need the company of other people to bounce ideas off of, or just like tell your feelings to.
Yeah, and they were obviously just as invested in knowing what was going on and everything. So basically, your dad took me back to our house, I got my car, I got a bag, planned on, staying there for a few days or whatever while we were trying to figure this out. And
I would love to just jump in and tell you my side of things. But I don't necessarily know if that's possible because I truly, at this point, I have very little recollection of this time, which I can't attribute to what I ended up being diagnosed with, or if it's just my brain has blocked it out because it was so traumatic, or I have no idea. I can't really remember. I didn't remember where I was. I was basically reverting back to a time back when I was like creating this new reality for myself where I thought I was back in the university that I went to for my freshman year of college. And I was thinking like, I had this thought that I was in a biology classroom and there were these cats and dogs running around and that we were supposed to be convincing them to have puppies and kittens, and we were going to be nurturing the cats and dogs to up until adulthood. Like, does not make sense at all. And I don't even know what would have prompted that type of hallucination in my brain, but I was just totally out of it. So
Hannah ended up being in the hospital for basically a month, just short of a month. But it was really like a 2-week period of trying to get you diagnosed. And to backtrack a little bit, that was, like I said, it was really hard for me to be able to get through because the hospital, I mean, they were overloaded, and because I couldn't be there and know what was going on, it was just me waiting by the phone, trying to get phone calls, and also, and not know, I mean, I didn't know if my number was, in shift changes and things like that, it was like, I didn't know if my number was available. And it's not like, because you were so unaware, Hannah, it was hard for me to know if people even knew that they should be contacting me or whatever. So I would try to call without overwhelming them to try and get information. But, I think it was within that first day, they had, put a neurologist on your case. And the reason that they did that was, they were running basically any test they could think of, and everything was coming back negative. And this was what was weird for me, is because I get this call from this neurologist and he lists all these tests that they've run and everything coming back negative, and they can't find anything. And this is where, like, the neurologist was telling me, but I don't think I was really grasping what that meant. And he said, okay, all this is negative, this is negative, this is negative, but you do have some lesions in your brain. And I'm like, I'm like, I don't know what that means. And I realized, so what does that mean? And he was like, well, that's what we're trying to figure out. And so then, of course, me, your parents, your whole family, we're sitting there Googling, okay, what are brain lesions? Mm-hmm. And in reality, brain lesions can be a lot of things. And depending on where they are in your brain, they can affect many different aspects of yourself. Yeah, and what we'd eventually find out, so they show up as kind of like scar tissue on an MRI. I'm sure, Hannah, if your brother is listening, who is a neuroscience student, he's probably going to point out how much I'm butchering this, and I don't remember my neuroscience from undergrad. But anyway, they were demyelinating lesions, and the myelin sheath is the part of your neurons. It's part of what allows the signals to transfer correctly. And they were demyelinating lesions. And okay, so it turns out there are a whole host of conditions that cause demyelinating lesions, and then the symptoms vary by that. And the location of where the brain damage occurs is going to impact the symptoms that you have. And so we find out that there are these lesions. They list off a bunch of things that could be associated with brain lesions. And most of the things are saying it's not really consistent with that, either the location of the lesions or the way that they look. it's not really consistent with these disorders. And one of the first things they present is multiple sclerosis, MS, and they say it doesn't look like that. That is one of the more common things that could be going on, but it's not really presenting that way. At this point, they were bringing in, they had a neurology team in there. They had a rheumatology team in there. They had an infectious disease doctor in there. So they were bringing in all these different experts to try and figure out what was going on from their angle. And they were doing exactly what they should be doing. Each one of those specialists was trying to diagnose this from their area of expertise. And like I said, it was difficult because I would be waiting by the phone and they weren't calling if they didn't have an update. And now in retrospect, I see, that was really frustrating for me. And it was hard. And I was getting bombarded and overwhelmed by messages from family wanting to know what was going on. And I was like, I'm barely holding myself together. And I don't know what's going on. And again, I cannot express how thankful I am for Hannah's parents at this time, because man, if I had been alone at home with my thoughts, just even trying to do the most basic things to take care of myself, I don't think I would have.
Even like making dinner would have probably
I probably would not have been. I wasn't even with your mom telling me, hey, you need to eat. I was still not eating properly for several days. Can
I just tell a sidebar really quick?
Yes.
Just as a sidebar, just to insert some comedy. Sorry, I got tickled. At this point, I was thinking I was back at college, like I said. And I remember, I don't know if I was eating or what my issue was, but I remember getting on my phone. Of course, I couldn't pick up the phone and call you, but I could get on Postmates and Postmate.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, I need to get myself together. I'm crying. At one point I got on my phone. So again, I wasn't hungry. I wasn't eating. I wasn't, I was just sleeping, tearing out my IV, acting like a complete lunatic. But then I can get on my phone. I got on Postmates and ordered like a strawberry milkshake from Wendy's or something like that, which is not my go-to. If I'm going to get like ice cream somewhere, I'm not going to get a strawberry smoothie. And I haven't eaten at Wendy's in a hot minute. But anyway, I remember getting it and I was thinking I was in a dorm room, not in a hospital, and I had them come and I remember they were the poor guy who was probably trying to deliver it was like, dude, I'm sitting outside of a hospital right now. And I remember he messaged me directly, like, because I guess that's part of the app. I don't really remember. But anyway, he messaged me directly and he was like, where are you, friend? Like, he kept calling me friend. And I was like, I don't remember what I said to him. And I have since deleted all of the messages. If I, like, for example, a friend of ours had a baby at the time that I initially got sick. And I remember he messaged me a picture of the baby and I responded and he was like, hey, Tyler said you were not doing so hot. Are you okay? And I was like, didn't respond. So any like that message, the message from Postmates, whatever, and like all the group messages I was in, I deleted all of them once I got kind of reoriented and figured out what was going on, because reading over them just made me feel extremely weird and I just wanted to be back to myself. So I got rid of all of those, but I had to. I just died with laughter when I figured out that it wasn't a dream. I actually tried to Postmate a milkshake or a shake or smoothie, whatever, to my hospital room during a coronavirus scare, during all of this stuff. Like I just thought that was so funny.
And I guess that's where I'll say that, and she kind of touched on this, that I couldn't really get through to Hannah because either her phone wasn't charged, or it was turned off, or she wasn't answering her phone. And then she kept moving rooms, and I would try to call the room phone and she wouldn't answer the room phone. And what I would eventually find out much later is that they had someone, they had a permanent nurse or somebody sitting in there with her all the time, because she couldn't really be trusted to be alone. Because again, she was a fall risk. She wasn't supposed to be getting up, but she was tearing out IVs. She was just being
a nuisance.
And that's sometimes. And I didn't know this was going on, but what sometimes would happen is that this sitter that was there with you would answer the phone and give it to you. When I would call the room phone, they would answer the phone and give it to you. And you would either not say anything or not even get the concept of being on a phone call. About a week into it, I got a call from one of your nurses, and she talked to her supervisor, and I got special permission to come and visit you. I mean, that was huge. They were one visitor. I was going to be the only one allowed in. And I assumed this would be a one-time thing, and that was it. So, I leapt on that, and I stopped everything I was doing, obviously, and got there as soon as I could. And this was where I got, some of what I've talked about. I got a better picture of what was actually going on with you. And it actually ended up being lucky that day was when two of the doctors, a rheumatologist and an infectious diseases doctor, came in, and I was able to talk to them directly and get, there's a difference between being able to wait for a phone call and talk on the phone for a little bit of time and being in there in the room with the doctor. And that rheumatologist is actually who would end up being your primary doctor for dealing with all this now.
Well, managing all of my medications and infusions.
Yeah. I don't know. It was one of those things where it was just
serendipitous.
Yeah. It was like this. That was the perfect day for me to be there. And the neurologist was asking you the question that you hate so much and now laugh about. It makes you uncomfortable. He was saying, what's a quarter plus a dime plus a nickel? And that was a processing question. He had other questions too, but that was the one where it was like, you could not put that together. And that was supposed to be a higher level processing thing, where it's like, it's math, but it's also, you have to pull from memory to know how much each of these are valued at and then put that together. And it was not something that you could even.
I know he asked me, what is my address at one point, and I could remember the zip code, but that was it.
But it was, that's the thing, is he would, every time he was in there every day, and he would ask these questions, and there was a neurology nurse practitioner that would come in the morning, and he would come in the and the neurologist would come in the afternoon. They would ask you these questions over and over, and the hospitalist would ask you these questions. And me being there and hearing the questions you couldn't answer then turned into me doing exactly what neurology had told me not to do, which was asking you difficult questions. I was only supposed to tell you about my day, and not because it was stressful for you. It was difficult when you were more aware and realized you couldn't answer questions. I would be encouraged because you would answer a question once, and then we would turn around and you wouldn't be able to answer it. And neurology was saying, don't do that. Just tell her about your day when you can talk to her, which is really hard for me to do. Well, I don't know. My day is Googling mysterious illnesses. And anyway, so I could go on all day about this, but basically they're throwing around a lot of different illnesses that could be associated with this. And while they were looking at bacterial and viral infections, those were more things that were a cause of whatever was going on. So it was like, if they could nail down, so that you were being tested for all, you were tested for, I think, H1N1 and several different varieties of herpes, and you were tested for
leukemia, right? Or
leukemia, tested for cancers. You were tested for every variation of meningitis. You were tested for all these, and encephalitis. You were tested for all these things under the sun, and they were suggesting things like I said, MS went from being off the table to that being a strong contender and being an atypical case of it. Eventually, they settled on ADEM, which is acute disseminated encephalomyelitis, which is, that was a good case scenario in this, because it's like a very extreme first onset of MS was kind of my understanding of it. So they treat it the same way. They treat it with high dosage IV steroids, and then that's what they start treating you for. They start treating you as if this is either MS or ADEM. And they start giving you IV steroids over a few days. And you were already starting to improve some at this point anyway. And that's because your body was coming back from the initial damage, but also these steroids to reduce the inflammation that was causing the lesions and all these things. So once you started responding to the steroids, they moved you over to inpatient rehab. I was there the day they moved you, so I was able to go over with you. But because they have the rehab side is mostly much older aged, high risk people, they were in the same thing of, we don't want you coming and going anymore. And the real reason they were letting you come was because of the confusion. So at this point, we set up things like Google Duo so I could video chat you, so family could video chat you. And like I said, I was able to help with the transport of you to the other side of the facility, to the rehab side. But you go in and we can't, we don't know. So you're getting PT 2 times a day, you're getting OT 2 times a day, you're getting speech therapy. Every nurse you had, every physical therapist you had, every occupational therapist you had, such great, helpful people. And I can't express how thankful I am to everyone that did so much and invested so much in just trying to figure out what was going on and get you better. And there's a lot of I think in some instances it felt like you were their only patient in ways, and especially on that rehab side.
While I was at rehab, there was one day that I woke up and, like I said, I had been having that weird, feeling like I had cotton shoved in my ears, whatever. But there was one day when I woke up while I was at the rehab side, and I basically had no hearing in my right ear. I don't know what happened, but I was listening to The Office, and everyone's voices, and I've watched The Office 100 million times. I know everybody's voice. I know all the lines. It's not anything that I'm unaccustomed to hearing. But all of a sudden, nobody, I would isolate my right ear by plugging my left ear, and I would hold my phone up right against the speaker right up against my right ear, and everyone's voices sounded metallic and robotic, and it was very strange because the night before I was hearing fine or whatever. That morning I told my nurse, who ended up telling my doctor that while I was there, she's saying that she has no hearing in her right ear. And several days after that, every morning, I was still doing PT and whatever, but he would come in and he would ask, is your hearing still, the same? And I was like, yeah, I still can't hear out of my right ear, which isn't true. I do have hearing. It's just severely damaged. And he will never hear this, but that's okay. I had a PT at the time who invested a lot in my situation. He was a vestibular specialist, so he was helping me a lot with my balance. He ended up finding what ended up being my diagnosis, which is called Susac syndrome. He knew about the lesions. He knew about my hearing loss. So one day he said, I want you to do something for me. And he had me stand in front of this painting on the wall. And he said, I want you to cover your left eye. And he gave me a piece of paper and a pencil. And he said, okay, on the left-hand side, I want you to, cover your right eye. And if there's any dark spots, draw it on the left-hand side. And then on the right side, cover your left eye and then draw any circles over there. And I was like, oh yeah, I totally have, in my left eye, there's a huge black spot. And then on the right eye, there's just a small one by my nose. And so I drew that, and he took that, and he looked kind of excited at first. And I think it was because I think that he was just like, okay, he's not a doctor, but he had this thought, and he researched it, and all of a sudden my symptoms started lining up.
And it was suddenly something where it was like, this diagnosis explains all of your symptoms, where the hesitance with everything else has been, yes, X, Y, and Z are consistent with this, but this one thing is really making you atypical of this diagnosis. And that's why there's hesitance with all these other things, because it's like, it's not really fitting into this box, but suddenly this box is starting to make sense.
for people who haven't done the research, which I don't expect you to, but Susac syndrome, it's an autoimmune disease. It affects women in my age range. And it affects the small arteries in your brain, in your ears, and in your eyes. It's a triad of symptoms. And I presented with all three of those at a very aggressive onset. Like all of the sudden, I had all three of these things.
It also is commonly as it can be, misdiagnosed as ADEM, which again at this point was her working diagnosis.
I kind of want to just speed on because we're really far into this now. But we ended up thinking that I was going to be released from physical therapy because I start making significant improvements. Oh, and I'll just say I started becoming aware of, okay, people aren't coming to see me. I know why. Yeah, I knew why people couldn't come. But then there was one day where I was at physical therapy, which was just downstairs from my hospital room. And they asked me to step outside, and I see that you are there. My parents are there. My grandma is there. And then I think 4 of our friends. And you guys were all standing 6 feet apart. There was a sign. Everyone was wearing masks. And it was unfortunate because I have this hearing loss now. And so I can't understand at that. I've gotten much better at understanding what people are saying to me, not because my hearing's better, but because my processing is a lot better. At the time, I wasn't hearing what you guys were saying to me because you guys were standing so far away and we were outside. It was windy. There was a lot of components that made it difficult, but just seeing familiar faces, I definitely was choked up because I had only just realized like that day, I feel like it hit me. I'm so lonely. I'm just, I'm so tired of being a patient. I just want to be with family. I just want to be a wife again. I just want to be a daughter, and that was a testament to one of our friends that organized it. That was incredibly sweet of him, but then also the staff made it happen too.
Because we thought we were just going to be the gym that she did physical therapy in was on the first floor. So we thought we were just supposed to be standing out there with a sign and waving at her. And when we got there, he did come out, gave us all masks, said, "Stay back. I'm going to bring her out so you can see her." And this was huge for me because, I hadn't seen her in a few days, and suddenly she was walking on her own because she hadn't been. Like, she had to use a walker. She was barely able to get around, and, he was supporting her and making sure she didn't fall. But like, I saw these huge improvements and huge gains from just the few days before that I had seen her. So that was encouraging to me. And to jump forward a little bit, they decide to send her to a different campus that had a stronger MRI. And they wanted to, they were checking to see if there had been any changes since her previous MRI, but also hopefully to get a better picture of the lesions because that could better identify it. Long story short, she spent another like 24 to 36 hours there, I think. She gets this team come in and they say, "Okay, have you heard of Susac syndrome?" And she's like, "Well, yes, I have."
From my physical therapist.
So she gets her official diagnosis and they change her treatment, which, by the way, this has its own difficulty because, again, it's such a rare disorder and different people present in different ways and people respond to treatment in completely different ways.
Yeah. So my rheumatologist, him and a team of rheumatologists talked amongst themselves and they came up with this plan. And ever since we've been, released and done our own research, it seems to be, we have found that it is following what the majority of people who have had Susac syndrome, what they are reporting is helpful.
But I will say, and this is so worth noting, is that I am so appreciative of her rheumatologist in how much he listens to not just her condition, but also our life plans and things that, a lot of these drugs are problematic. Some of the ones that are used to treat people can cause permanent infertility. Or there's a lot of things that could go wrong. And he was like, these are the ones that I want to try you on because these are the ones that are safe for you to start on and will not potentially cause you problems down the road. And if these work, then we're going to keep you on these and we will adjust accordingly the doses. And that's over the past 7 months. We have been able to adjust her medication. She's been able to taper way down on the steroids.
Yeah, I started off on 80 milligrams of prednisone. I'm down to 7.5.
Yeah. And she gets the IVIG treatments regularly. That's now spaced out. She's on another infusion that is typically rituximab. That's typically given for it's given alongside chemotherapy, I think, is my understanding. So she's on that. But again, it's just, I cannot thank the medical team enough for how much careful consideration they put into this, and also how carefully they monitor her to be like, if something is not working anymore, to make adjustments. So just short of a month of her first ER visit, we returned together to her parents' house because she was getting, at that point, she was still doing physical and occupational therapy, each one 2 times a week. She was on all the different medications. She was not able to drive. She was not cleared to drive by herself at this point. There was a lot of stuff going on.
Well, and I think it was also, I think we both still needed that support.
I cannot thank her parents enough for all they did. And it's one of those things where it's like, I think they would describe it as, that's our job. That's what we're here for. But not everyone has that. And I mean, even if we'd lived in a different town and been far away from family, there's so much of this that I'm like, I don't know how I would have navigated it while you were in the hospital, or when we got out. I don't know how we would have even navigated it together. And we continued to live with your parents for about 3 more months after that, before your treatments tapered off enough that it was manageable. You were able to drive on your own. You were able to transition back into working with a modified schedule. And yes, I am so thankful. And I also want to say, one of the, I guess, positive things from this was I got a lot closer to your parents during this time. Because I mean, one, I was living with them, but we were constantly talking about these obviously very difficult things. And I was able to bond with your parents in a way that I hadn't had an opportunity before. I didn't, I'm a very awkward, introverted, anxious person. So trying to, I can sometimes have a difficult time connecting with anyone. And anyway, I think I developed a really deeper bond with your parents during this time. And I'm so thankful for that aspect of it.
We did find, when I was released from the hospital, a support group on Facebook that actually had a surprising number of people, I think several thousand. And I want to, in case this ever makes it onto, a link is ever posted to that, whether we do it or if somebody finds this and puts it there, I'll say for myself, when I saw other people talking about it so candidly and discussing their symptoms and their treatments, I just thought, okay, I'm not, I was alarmed when I found out it was so rare. I don't know why, but to me, I was thinking, well, if it's so rare, that means that there hasn't been there's not a ton of research out there. There's not a ton of, literature on it. And so it was concerning to me. And when I found out there was this whole wealth of information, I mean, even if it is just anecdotal type stuff, it was still nice to read about, if that makes sense.
I've seen a lot of different ways in different countries how people have learned to deal with it. And some of the top researchers or doctors who have dealt with Susac syndrome are on there and active on there. And there's really good information on there. And I want to highlight that it is a great group in that respect. And I am glad it's out there. I think just from our experience, we need to say that we did have to distance ourselves from it a bit because
me more than you. I completely, I was part of it. I posted on it. I reacted to some of the posts that other people put. And I did that for, I don't know, like a month and a half or something. The more I read about people's situations and how bad it got for some people, the more, it opened my eyes to how well I was doing, and also brought me into the world of other people and how unlucky some people have gotten with medical teams, like their lack of resources, things like that. And it pushed me to feel like I needed to just focus on my improvements and needed to focus on staying positive. I just ended up needing to totally unfollow the group and everything, because I just felt like it was holding me back from where I could go.
What we've learned for her specifically, and again, the focus is everyone is going to be different. And what we've learned for her specifically is that we have to focus on how well she's doing and on the positive sides, and overlook the embarrassing things or the difficult things or the bad days that she's had. So that's where I'll say, anyone who's interested, check out the Facebook group. I fully support and I'm happy that group exists, because it's so encouraging and it is a wealth of information. So
it is a vital resource to have a community of people because the loneliness that you can feel when you have a rare illness, it can be extremely crippling. And to know that you're not alone, as cheesy as that sounds,
and not everyone has the support that we have. Not everyone has the family support. Not everyone has the medical team willing to do all that research. Yeah. I mean, I've seen people on there who have found it because they've been Googling themselves, and they're like, hey, I wonder if this is what I have. And they're reaching out to try and get information or guidelines of, how do I get to a doctor who will consider this? So I have nothing but positive things to say about the group. We're just talking about the idea of support groups in general, and how, know your boundaries there.
Mm-hmm.
If you're constantly engaging in something that is triggering or upsetting to you, maybe you need to take a step back.
Yeah, and it's not something that you necessarily have to cut out forever. If it's helpful at one point in your journey, and then it becomes unhelpful, but then later on, if you need it again, go back to it.
Facebook has that great unfollow setting where you won't see anything unless you actively seek it out. So, use that.
Something that you had talked about earlier, when it came to medications, was the risk of infertility. So it was very important, because Tyler, you and I had talked about this, and it wasn't public knowledge before any of this, but that's okay. We had talked when we first got married, okay, we want to wait a while. And that ended up being, okay, we want to be married for like 2 years, have that time for ourselves just to be.
And we've talked about planning before. We talked about planning in the last episode, and our goal was, okay, we're checking the boxes.
Mm-hmm.
We're getting more, we're paying off some debts. We're getting financially stable. We're buying a house. We're getting our house in order. So we started talking at the end of 2019, beginning of 2020, we started talking about, okay, now this is our timeline for starting a family. And for us at the time, and I want to define starting family for us, it meant starting to try and have our own biological children. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to find that, because starting a family can look a lot of different ways for a lot of different people. And we definitely don't want to alienate or isolate anyone in terms of how their family looks or how they want to create their family, or how they're able to create their family. Because that's what we're talking about here, where it's like, anyway, I'll let you say where we're going, because I feel like I'm jumping ahead.
So, that was our plan. And then COVID and me getting sick kind of threw a wrench into that. And there was one specific meeting. It was, I think, our very first meeting with my rheumatologist since I was released, since I was kind of on my treatment plan. And you and I went into the office and we talked to him, and he basically was kind of laying out what my treatment plan was going to look like over the next 2 years, basically. While he was going over all of this, you guys cannot get pregnant right now. And you cannot get pregnant for probably 2 years. Which it was something, I think it was one of those moments or situations where, yeah, it's something you want, but you don't realize how much you want it until somebody says you can't have it. And then you start feeling like you're digging your heels in and like you're just thinking, well, what do you mean? It's my life. It's my, my family. Like, what do you mean I can't? But what he meant by that was the medications that I'm on are pregnancy is contraindicated. It would not be good for me or a baby to be pregnant right now while I'm on these things. Basically just saying it would be in your best interest to wait to start a family. And essentially it was, because this was a 2-year plan, it's probably not going to be until 2022 before you can start that, or start that conversation. And I know that was, I mean, I think it was hard for us, but I know I felt like a great deal of guilt when that conversation took place and for a period of time after that, because I felt, before, if we're just being honest and open, I think it was mostly you who was like, we need to wait until we have the house, the money, whatever. And it was more like we were very, very much having a plan primarily controlled or established by you, but then supported by me. And now it felt like I was the one that was holding us back. And I had a really hard time dealing with that. I don't know exactly where all that stems from, like where all the different emotions were coming from. But I was really struggling with this idea that because of this sickness, which I cannot control, I could not do anything to prevent that it happen. All these medications, like I have to be on them. So there's nothing that I could have done to make the outcome any different. And yet I still felt a lot of insecurity and doubt and frustration and guilt, just a lot of guilt about not being able to start a family. And I have since had a lot of ups and downs. There are some days I feel like the desire to have children right now has been completely removed from my heart. Like it's not right now, just, like it's not only that I'm okay with this idea that we shouldn't, but it's like, I don't even want to right now. So I've been feeling, there have been some days, weeks that have gone by and I'm like, I am completely fine with this. And then I
think the pandemic plays into that too.
Yeah.
Because I think we do know several people who were pregnant when the pandemic started and and they've since given birth or are preparing to give birth, and we know how much it's changed their whole experience because, they haven't been able to have the baby showers. They haven't been able to have the family there to see the new baby. And that's a difficult thing. And then there's also just the risk because, we talk about, I don't know how much research there is in COVID and pregnant mothers, but I mean, I know pregnant mothers are usually lumped in with immunosuppressed people. You take the same precautions. You don't eat raw fish and you don't clean cat litter boxes. Like, it's the same things. So I think that also plays into it right now. It's like, we personally don't feel safe. So that helps some too, where it's like, I know when Hannah's having difficult days, I try to remind her that it's like, you know what, even if you weren't sick right now, I would be the one holding us back again because I would be saying, I'm not comfortable right now starting this, because if you hadn't gotten sick, I wouldn't be going anywhere near a doctor or hospital or anything. So the idea of you trying to get just regular checkups because of us trying to get pregnant or whatever, I wouldn't want to do that. So it would be completely me holding us up again if you hadn't gotten sick.
And for whatever reason, somebody who studies psychology, you should be able to tell me because that's what your major is in. But when it's you defining it, I'm fine with it. And I totally agree. But when it comes to me being the one who is, I don't even know how to phrase it.
I think we will, when we have another topic on different personality types, I think that'll come up again because I think a lot of that, it's not necessarily in general, how other people would process it is how your personality type processes these things.
Yeah. So that's something that I will have days where I'm just extremely down about it. I am very sensitive about it. I'll cry. I'll be really frustrated. There will be something that just, whether it's something with our friend's baby or, my nieces and nephews or whatever, there will be just something that either rubs me the wrong way or it just triggers something and I just have a really bad day. But then there will be days where all I want to do is love on, like I want all of the photos and I want to talk to my nieces and nephews on FaceTime and whatever. Like that's all I want to do. And it actually is like a balm for the pain in my heart. Like I don't even know. I'm not sure why it fluctuates so much, but it is a journey up and down. I have days where I'm just really struggling and then other days where I'm doing just fine. So and I worry about people being, I've never been so sensitive than I have since all of this has happened. And I don't want people to walk on eggshells around me. But I do want people to be aware, though. That
you don't want to get the question of when are you going to start a family?
Yeah.
And in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, is that's not a question that people should ask.
That's not an opinion.
Most people should not ask the question of when are you going to start a family? There's a Facebook post that's floating around right now about people with one child and not asking them when are you going to have another, because you don't know someone's situation, and for all you know, somebody might have been trying for years to get pregnant and can't. Someone might have had multiple miscarriages. Someone might, or they might have very valid reasons for why they don't want to have a child that are just, you could be triggering someone's darkest traumas by asking a question like that unknowingly. And it seems like an innocent enough question, but I know it's something that right now, like, I fear people asking Hannah that because I know how important it is to her and how much she wants that.
Mm-hmm.
And as she said, she has up and down days. So it is that I don't want anyone to ask that. I don't want anyone to say those things to her and upset her. Anyway, to keep moving forward, unless you have something else to say about that, Hannah.
The only thing is that we recently adopted a cat.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, we like I said, we were thinking that we would be introducing a human into our lives in 2020 or early 2021. And instead, we brought home a furry little friend from the Great Plains SPC. What is it?
Great Plains SPCA.
And we thought we were going to adopt a kitten, like a little tiny kitten.
A kitten or two, because then leading up to it, we were worried, oh, well, they're going to be lonely and not have a friend. So we go from neither one of us we both had family pets, but we've never been responsible for a pet before.
Mm-hmm.
And, this was for our 2-year wedding anniversary, and we were, quarantining ourselves, trying to figure out what to do for an anniversary. And we decided that a pet was what was going to work for us. And Hannah had always grown up with dogs. I grew up with cats and had an outdoor dog later on. Hannah had almost no experience with cats, but we decided that a cat made more sense for us for what we were looking for.
We looked at like several cats.
Several kittens. We looked at several kittens because we'd browsed online. We went in with a list of kittens we wanted to meet. We looked at all of these. We're looking at them. They're in this kennel on this, but it's a double layer of kennels, and we're trying to look at these, and there's just this meowing in our ear. There's just this cat that's meowing in our ear, and we're ignoring it. We're terrible. We're ignoring this cat that's meowing, and it's a cat she's in a kennel by herself above, and she's just meowing, and we're like, okay, well let's say hi to this cat.
Yeah. And we had been, maybe looking online with somewhat shallow
everyone wants the cutest kitten in the shelter,
or the unique, a
Yeah.
unique looking cat. But this cat was kind of a little ruffian. It was a tabby cat. Apparently she had been an outdoor cat, had already had a litter of kittens, was not the maternal type. She doesn't like other cats. She's
which is why she was isolated in a kennel by herself.
She I don't know what had happened, if she had like a gum disease or what, but she had already lost like half her teeth or had them extracted when she got there.
She had a notch out of her ear. She looked rough because they had just recently spayed her because, she gave birth and then she was nursing. So she looked a little rough when we saw her.
Yeah, she did.
And because we're terrible, and anyone who knows The Office, we made a joke about Garbage, the cat that Dwight gets Angela from. Anyway, because we're terrible, but
Garbage because he likes to eat garbage. Yeah.
But we open the kennel door and she immediately climbs into Hannah's arms.
Yeah.
She immediately starts giving head bunts, which are it's like a head butt, but they're technically called head bunts, we've learned, and it's the cat equivalent of a kiss.
Yeah. 100 of them.
Yeah. Trying to put her back in the kennel was not going very well. So, because we're terrible people, we walked away from her. We looked at the kittens that we were considering again. And then we talked about it. We went back to her, saw her again. And we're like, no, after hearing her story and interacting with her, there's no way that we can go home with another cat. And obviously this year has been rough for us. And the idea of providing a forever home for another living creature that also had a rough go of it and really needed a supportive and healthy family. It just seemed like, this is the obvious decision.
Yeah. And so I'll just wrap it up by, we thought that our family would look different this year, but this is what it looks like now. And it's awesome. Like, she has definitely come out of her shell, and she still is that sweet kitten or cat that we got while we were there, that she acted like while we were there, I should say. But she's definitely more rambunctious than we thought.
She's more rambunctious. She's not as sweet as she was. She likes to play a lot, but she comes to bed with us every night. We're constantly looking at each other about how cute she is anytime she does something. So I made the garbage joke earlier, but I have to say I feel like a full-on like pet dad here, constantly taking pictures of her. We look at her, look at each other, make the squee face, but she's a lot of fun and has brought us so much joy over the past month that we've had her. So
and she's helped me definitely come to just a more comfortable place with the idea that we're going to have to wait a little bit longer before we start our family. And I think about that even differently. I feel like this is my family. I know she's a cat. I know that, you and I thought that we would be having, the room that's across from our room. We thought that would be a nursery, but instead that has become kind of my home office. And it's a place that, Bee is her name. Well, Honeybee is her official name, but we call her Bee. And, it's become the place that we hang out all every day of the weekday. We hang out there together, and maybe and hopefully one day it will still be a nursery, but I'm okay with what it is right now. I'm okay with I'm all right with I had just a bad day a couple of days ago. I told you, I said I'm really having a hard time, and I don't know, I can't remember. I know, never mind, I do remember what triggered it, but all I have to do is kind of look around, and I'm like, we are so lucky to have the family that we do. And she does bring me a lot of joy and comfort. I did want to, before we get into our wisdom nugget, I did want to just, for anyone who may be in the healthcare field listening to any of this, I did want to talk about some of the symptoms that I still am dealing with, in case you're curious. The black spots in my vision that I had mentioned before are permanent. They're not going to go away unless there's a divine intervention that takes place. My vision is permanently affected and shouldn't get worse unless I have a flare up. And then my ears, I've had, I think, 3 audiograms now. Nothing's really changed. My left ear is my good ear. My right ear is significantly damaged. And they are thinking that I may be a good candidate for receiving a cochlear implant in my right ear and then getting a hearing aid in my left ear because it also is impacted. I also have what my rheumatologist has described as a auditory hallucinations, where I hear birds chirping. This happened while I was in the hospital and has remained to be the case. In both ears, I hear bird chirps, and some days it's really persistent and obnoxious, and then other days I hardly notice them at all. I'm also still dealing with tinnitus, extreme ringing in my ears some days. Other days I really don't notice it, and some days it's just complete white noise. Because the onset of my hearing loss was so sudden, it was one day I was doing okay, and then the next day it was like my right ear just wasn't working anymore. It was like completely disconnected from my brain. I had a lot of anxiety about it. I was worried that one day I would wake up and be completely deaf. And to me, that was a terrifying reality. And I think the biggest reason why it was so scary to me was because I didn't know how to communicate without my hearing, other than through, a text message or, email or written communication would be the only way I would know how to have a conversation with somebody without my hearing. But something that helped me once I realized that there are options was, looking into ASL. Now, I have only done a few lessons online, and I can link to the resource that I've been using, but I thought that losing my hearing altogether would be the worst thing that could happen to me, which is fairly insulting for, people that are deaf, because, my worst nightmare is their reality, and, they're perfectly normal people. And that's not what I'm saying at all. It's just more of, it's a complete unknown to me. And so becoming more educated and figuring out what my options are was really empowering to me. Again, I know probably like less than 50 signs, and I don't even know if I'm doing those correctly, but it's something that definitely helped that anxiety lessen.
I think we are ready to transition to wisdom nuggets. And I think, at least for this one, I don't know if this will always be the way we do this, but I think I want to let you say what your wisdom nugget is from this.
I'll say that I have 2. One of them is to lean into your support systems that are established in your life, or lean into new ones. Look for support groups, look to family members if you have that option. Know where there are safe places for you to lean against, because, especially if you're going through something like this where it is so scary and unknown, you need people to, even if it's just to listen. A lot of people didn't have or don't have a great wealth of advice that they can give to me, because it is such a unique experience that I'm going through. But that's hardly what I'm looking for anyway. I usually am just looking for somebody to hear me and to validate that what I am feeling is legitimate. It just makes me feel less stuck in my own head. And then the other, and I was going to also say, like, that goes for, your support system, like looking for like family and whatnot, but then like your medical professionals, if you're going through something very similar or even remotely similar. I leaned so heavily against the nurses, the PTs, the OTs, the specialists that were involved in my case. Just the act of doing that, of leaning into it, but then also the extreme gratitude, realize these are people that their only agenda is to help you recover. And that is an incredibly selfless pursuit that they're on. I have so much gratitude for everybody who is involved in that. And the other wisdom nugget, just know you are a lot stronger than you think you are. I never would have imagined myself going through something like this. And I think we kind of explained why it was so scary and so difficult. But there are moments that I haven't touched on, like the fear of, there were times when I first was released from the hospital, you and I were lying beside one another. And like I would wake up in the morning and I'd just sit there and I would be kind of paralyzed because I felt like I couldn't hear the normal like humming of a house, the sound of like the AC going. Like I wasn't able to hear that, and I remember thinking like I would start snapping my finger right next to my good ear because I just wanted to make sure that I was still hearing. And that fear, like I don't know how to describe it without talking forever, but there's so much uncertainty wrapped up in all of this. And I know I had a good experience with my recovery, but and people don't have that. But no matter what it is, you are so much stronger than you give yourself credit for. That's the wisdom nugget, I guess.
I think I have 2 wisdom nuggets as well. I'm gonna try to go through them quickly. I think my first one, and I think a lot of what we've danced around in this, is be kind and sympathetic toward others because you don't know their situation. We talked about the family planning aspect. We talked about Hannah mentioned when she was talking about ASL, you don't know what anyone's situation is, and you don't know how things that you say just passively might ruin someone's day, might really hurt them, and you may never know. And
the fact that you are not an expert in anyone else's life except your own.
Yeah. And don't, be careful when you say things like, oh man, that would be the worst thing that could ever happen to me, when it may be the everyday reality of someone else, or maybe something that newly has happened to them. So I'll say that through this whole experience, I saw so much kindness and selflessness from so many people in unexpected places. I give a shout out to your work here and say the way that your work helped me navigate that aspect of making sure, we knew you had a job at the end of it. We knew you had health insurance through them that was being covered. There was never any difficulty there. And I can say there are plenty of other jobs. And I know during this time, people have gone through the terrible circumstance of completely losing their jobs because of the pandemic. And that was something we did lean heavily on. And I am so thankful for that experience. And juxtapose that against, I think during this pandemic, we have seen some of the most selfish acts of people. I mean, we've seen people do things that are so
self-serving.
Yeah. And they make me angry. And again, I have to go back and not contradict myself and say, I don't know their situations. I don't know why they're reacting that way. But I think I'm trying to be a more balanced person. And I know I am failing at that in different ways every day. So I'm trying to see that wisdom nugget myself. It's something I'm trying to be more sympathetic of other people's situations. And then I'll say, we've talked over and over about how I am a planner. I want to know exactly what I'm doing, when I'm doing it, how I'm going to do it, or I'm a lost puppy or a lost 2-year-old cat in a kennel, just begging for someone to give me direction and a home. No, I will say, life will surprise you. Life will knock you down. Life will slap you in the face. And if this had been reversed and I had been the one to get sick, I see so much strength in Hannah, because I know I would not have handled things as well, because I know who I am, and I know I would have been much more. I know I would have struggled with my mental health aspect of it far more than Hannah has seemed to show, I guess. And I think she has been able to focus more on positivity, and I'm learning from her every day. And, she becomes my hero over and over again every day because of that. And, so I'll say, to get back to the actual wisdom nugget I was trying to say, is that enjoy life. If you are a planner like me, don't get so caught up in, it's the enjoying the journey, common wisdom nugget that people will give all the time. But that it is what it is. It's a way we've learned that, our plans got turned upside down, and I look back, and especially when I did feel like I had lost my best friend, and there were 2 weeks or more that I thought Hannah would never be the same again. And that was the most terrifying thing to me. And I was constantly replaying all these little events over and over in my head of, oh, I wish I had done this differently. I wish I had appreciated that time better. I wish, we had gone on that weekend vacation or whatever. I wish we had, just spent those moments together that we didn't or whatever. And so yeah, make sure that you are enjoying the journey, because you don't know what will happen next. But don't live in fear, because you don't know what will happen next. So, don't be completely hedonistic and just focus on the moment, but, enjoy the moment. Enjoy that it's okay to plan, and also appreciate each and every little thing that happens to get you where you are. So, and that's what we're trying to accomplish with this podcast.
Yeah.
Because we're trying to make people more aware of common things or not so common things, and finding the positive in that.
All right. My clock says that we've been talking for 2 hours and 15 minutes, which is going to be whittled down to something more manageable. But I hope everything that we choose to leave in this episode was helpful. Next week, we hope to talk to one of our good friends and discuss something called the Enneagram test, which was involved in our marriage prep, and it's a personality inventory. We kind of touched on this in the episode from last week, but it's going to be an episode all about understanding who you are at your best and at your worst, and we'll dive all into all of that next week. So I just want to thank you for tuning in again for episode 1.2. We're not going to break it up, I don't think, too often. So thank you for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye.